9 Anno Domini, Teutoburg Forest, Germania. 3 Roman legions struggle through cold mud. 20,000 men, the elite of the most powerful army in the world. They've marched since dawn, soaked to the bone, their hobnailed sandals sinking into sodden earth. Centurion Marcus Caelius stops for a moment. He pulls from his bag a biscuit hard as stone, dips it into his canteen filled with sour liquid, and chews slowly. Around him, his men do the same. Some chew salted pork weeks old. Others share hard cheese. This isn't a feast. This is their fuel. The fuel that let them march 30 kilometers today. The fuel that will let them build a fortified camp tonight. The fuel that, for generations, has powered the greatest war machine the world has ever known. In hours, these legions will be ambushed. Most won't see Rome again, but their food system will survive. It will feed armies for another 1,000 years. Today we discover this system, what was really hidden in a Roman legionary's bag, and how food was as much a weapon as the sword or shield. Because Rome didn't conquer the world with swords, Rome conquered the world with stomachs. So what really powered these human war machines? The answer will surprise you. It wasn't red meat at every meal like in movies. It wasn't gladiator feasts. It was something much simpler, more ingenious, and more effective. The basis of the entire Roman army came down to one word: grain. Not meat, not vegetables, grain. The Roman legionary was essentially a carbohydrate-powered machine, and grain was his high-octane fuel. Wheat, barley, spelt, that's what made the legions march. Each soldier received a daily ration called the annona, and in this ration, 850 grams of grain, almost a kilogram, every day, without exception. This supply system, the annona militaris, wasn't just simple food distribution. It was a marvel of bureaucratic engineering, a pillar of the Roman state as important as the Senate itself. But why grain? Imagine feeding 400,000 men, scattered from Scotland to Egypt, Spain to Syria, in burning deserts and frozen forests for months, sometimes years. What do you choose? The answer lies in 3 qualities only grain possesses. First, pure energy. 850 grams of grain is about 3,000 calories. A legionary on active march burns up to 6,000 calories daily. Walking 30 kilometers with 40 kilos on your back, then digging ditches, building palisades, all in armor, under Mediterranean sun or Germanic rain. These men were human engines running on complex carbohydrates. Grain provided that slow, steady, lasting energy. Second, almost zero cost. Wheat and barley grew everywhere in the empire, from endless Egyptian plains to Sicilian hills, from Gaulish fields to North African valleys. Entire provinces existed solely to produce grain. Egypt alone produced 20 million bushels yearly just for Rome and its armies. This grain was collected as tax. Farmers paid in kind, not money. Result, a supply system almost free for the state. Third, immortality. Grain doesn't rot quickly. Stored dry in specially built granaries, it lasts months, even years. You can load it on carts, transport it for weeks, and it's still good. No other food combines these qualities. Meat rots in days. Vegetables spoil faster. Cheese and oil are too expensive for hundreds of thousands of men. Grain was the perfect solution. Simple, cheap, durable. The golden triangle of military logistics. But not all grains were equal. The elite grain was hard wheat, Triticum durum. This wheat made the best bread, porridge, flour. It was the grain of victorious legions, of permanent camps, of soldiers in good standing. But there was also the grain of shame, barley. For Romans, barley was what you gave horses and oxen. Putting a legion on barley rations sent a clear message: you've behaved like beasts. After rebellion, desertion, or cowardice in battle, punishment fell. Not only decimation, 1 in 10 executed by his own comrades, but also barley. Survivors were driven outside the camp to sleep without rampart protection and given barley. Imagine the shame, eating what animals ate under contemptuous gazes of your former brothers, a humiliation worse than death for many. This simple difference, wheat or barley, separated honor from disgrace, heroes from cowards. Now, about those daily 850 grams, almost a kilo of pure grain. But remember, it wasn't ready-made bread, it was raw grain. Why? Because flour spoils faster? Stale bread is inedible after 2 days, but grain is eternal. So every evening, after marching all day, after setting up camp, after digging ditches, the legionary pulled out his 2 round stones, the mola manuaria, his personal hand mill, 2 stones, weighing several kilos carried in his bag, mandatory, non-negotiable, integral to his equipment like his helmet or sword. And there, sitting by the fire, exhausted, hands calloused, he began to grind. Grinding, grinding, grinding. Half an hour, sometimes an hour, to transform grain into coarse flour. Every evening, without exception. This was ritual, like cleaning armor, like sharpening his sword, like repairing hobnailed sandals. The legionary depended on no one for food. He was autonomous, a complete survival unit. That's where Rome's true genius lay. Other armies depended on cooks, suppliers, merchants, not Romans. Each man carried his own survival on his back: grain, mill, canteen, mess kit. The 4 horsemen of self-sufficiency. Grain wasn't just food, it was independence, power. What allowed a legion to march deep into enemy territory, cut off from supply lines, and survive. Now our legionary has ground grain, coarse flour in his mess kit, and he's very hungry. What does he do? In movies you see legionaries eating fresh, crusty golden bread. Beautiful image. Completely false. Baking fresh bread in the field is nearly impossible. It requires an oven, time, stable conditions. A legion on the march has none of that. So legionaries had other methods, faster, more practical, better suited to their nomadic warrior life. First method, pulse, the ancestral memory of Rome, the national dish before the empire, eaten by Romulus's soldiers themselves. Biblical simplicity. Take coarse flour, add water, boil, stir, wait for it to thicken. There, you have pulse, a thick, sticky, beige porridge with no taste. The ancient equivalent of military mashed potatoes or Scottish porridge or Italian polenta, which descends from it. Nutritious? Absolutely. Delicious? Absolutely not. But pulse was a base, not a finished dish. A blank canvas each soldier painted according to what he had. Salted pork cubes, into the pulse. 3-week-old hard cheese, grated into pulse. Garlic from an abandoned village, crushed into pulse. Wild onions picked while marching, into the pulse. Suddenly, this bland porridge became something. Not a starred restaurant dish, but a hot, hearty, comforting meal after a hellish day. Second method, bucellatum, the legendary soldier's biscuit, ancestor of all military biscuits that followed for 2,000 years, designed for one thing, to last forever. The recipe? Stunningly simple. Flour, water, salt. That's it. No oil, no yeast, no sugar, nothing that could go rancid or moldy. Mix, form flat cakes or rings, and bake for a long time, until every moisture molecule evaporates. Then bake again. Bis coctus, twice cooked in Latin, from which comes our word biscuit. The result? A biscuit hard as granite, literally. You could use it as a projectile. Try biting into it dry and you'll break your teeth. But this stuff was indestructible. It could stay in your bag for months, in rain, heat, cold, and still be edible. How to eat it? You soak it in water, wine, posca, or broth. 15 minutes of soaking, and your stone becomes edible mush. Bucellatum was the legionary's life insurance. A few in his bag, and he could survive a week of forced march without lighting a fire. Maximum efficiency, zero romance. Third method, real bread. When the legion settled in permanent camps, fortresses, garrisons, things changed. Every major Roman camp had bakeries, real bakeries with huge stone ovens baking hundreds of loaves daily, panis militaris. Soldiers' bread? Dense, heavy, often with bran, sometimes with whole unground grains, but it was bread, real bread, warm, with crust, with crumb. For a legionary who'd spent months eating pulse and bucellatum, biting into fresh bread was like biting into paradise, the ultimate luxury, the sign you were safe, garrisoned, civilized again. Now let's talk about what these men drank. Romans drank something particular, something called pasca. Pasca was vinegar diluted in water. Yes, vinegar. More precisely, sour wine, acetum, that could no longer be drunk, pure, mixed with water. Sometimes with honey or herbs like coriander or mint. Sounds disgusting? Wait until you understand why it was brilliant. First, survival. Pure water on campaign was Russian roulette. Rivers were polluted with carcasses, excrement, village waste. Drinking raw water was playing with your life. Dysentery killed more legionaries than all barbarian swords combined. The vinegar in pasca killed bacteria. Not all, but enough to make the difference between life and death. Second, thirst. Paradoxically, pasca's acidity quenched thirst better than pure water. It stimulated salivation, gave freshness in the mouth. Third, energy. Wine, even sour, contains sugars and organic acids, enough for an energy boost. Pasca was antiquity's energy drink, the Roman Red Bull. Fourth, digestion. After swallowing pulse thick as cement, pasca's acidity helped the stomach break it down. Fifth, equality. Centurions, legionaries, cavalry all drank the same pasca. No fine wine for officers, no stagnant water for recruits. Everyone shared the same sour canteen, a symbol of unity. Want to know how universal pasca was? Remember Jesus' crucifixion? When he says, "I thirst," on the cross, what does a Roman soldier give him? A sponge soaked in pasca. It wasn't mockery. It was simply what soldiers on guard had, their standard drink. Each legionary carried his canteen, leather, wood, or ceramic, attached to his belt. Always full of pasca? As vital as his sword? More vital, perhaps? Because you can survive a day without fighting, but not without drinking. Grain and pasca were the base, but man doesn't live by bread alone. For a soldier to function at full capacity, he needed more? Proteins, fats, vitamins, flavors. The main source of proteins and fats: salted pork, lardum, pork fat, smoked bacon, meat salted until almost leather. Included in regular rations. Why pork? Because pigs eat literally anything, fatten quickly, reproduce quickly, and their meat preserves perfectly with salt. Legions often dragged pig herds with them. When fresh meat was needed, one was slaughtered. A small cube of lardum was an explosion of taste and energy. Add it to bland pulse, and suddenly you have a real meal. The fats gave flavor, satiety, dense calories. Second protein pillar, hard cheese, caseus, blocks of salted, dried cheese, hard as wood. This cheese could survive months without refrigeration. You could grate it on pulse, eat it with bucellatum, melted in soup. Nutritious, protein-rich, full of salt, and above all, it had taste. When circumstances permitted, soldiers supplemented rations by hunting and fishing. A legion camped near a river. Fishing became popular. Trout, perch, pike ended up grilled on campfires. Hunting, wild boar, deer, hares, birds, anything edible. Permanent camps often had vegetable gardens, small plots where soldiers grew onions, garlic, cabbage, turnips, lentils, peas, anything growing quickly and keeping well. Onion and garlic were particularly prized. They gave flavor to bland dishes and had natural antibacterial properties. Now, the strangest, most controversial, and most universally adored ingredient in Roman cuisine, garum. Garum was fermented fish sauce, the ancient equivalent of Asian soy sauce or Vietnamese nuoc mam. How was it made? Take small fish, anchovies, mackerels, sardines, put them in large stone vats, add tons of salt, let ferment in the sun for weeks. The guts decompose, enzymes work, and an amber-brown liquid forms. Filter it, that's garum. Sounds vile, right? But this stuff was liquid gold. The taste? Salty, umami, deep, complex. An explosion of flavor transforming any bland dish into a feast. Romans put garum on everything: pulse, meat, vegetables, even fruits. It was produced industrially in specialized centers along Mediterranean coasts and delivered to armies by entire convoys. Each legionary had access to this magic sauce, a small vial in his equipment, a few drops, and his monotonous pulse became bearable. But garum wasn't just about taste. It was also pure nutrition, rich in proteins, amino acids, salt, everything a soldier sweating 12 hours daily needs. Grain for energy, posca for hydration, lardum for fats, caseus for proteins, vegetables for vitamins, garum to tie it all together. It wasn't a dream diet, but it was functional, calculated, efficient. Now let's talk about how they prepared it. The basic unit of the Roman army was the contubernium, 8 men sharing a tent, living, marching, fighting, and eating together. These 8 men weren't just colleagues, they became brothers, depending on each other to survive, and this brotherhood was forged around a cauldron. Each contubernium received rations as a unit, not individually. Together, they shared a mule and cart carrying their common equipment: tent, millstones, tools, and above all, the bronze cauldron. This cauldron was the beating heart of the contubernium, the symbol of their unity. Imagine the scene. The legion just marched 30 kilometers. Men are exhausted, but work isn't finished. First set up camp, thousands digging ditches, planting palisades, pitching tents, 2 hours of grueling work. Then, finally, the blessed moment. The order comes: light the fires. In each contubernium, roles are distributed automatically. One gets wood, another builds the hearth, a third takes out rations and starts preparing. The cauldron is suspended over the fire. Water heats, flour is thrown in, stir. The pulse takes shape. Someone cuts lardum into cubes, another grates caseus, a third crushes garlic. Everything goes into the cauldron. A few precious drops of garum are added, stir again, and little by little this bland porridge transforms. It smells good, salty, smoky, comforting. Then comes the sacred moment. The 8 men sit in a circle around the fire, cauldron in the center. Each pulls out his patera, his flat bronze bowl with a long handle, his plate, his pan, his universal tool. They dip into steaming pulse, pour into patera. Each pulls out his spoon, no fork. Romans didn't know them. And they eat, in silence at first, too hungry to talk. Then tongues loosen. They recount the day, mock the one who fell in mud, laugh at the new centurion's face, share rumors. It wasn't just a meal, it was the reason these men fought for their brothers. Because in this circle, around this fire, with this steaming cauldron, they were no longer strangers. They were a family. A soldier's life wasn't all suffering. There were also moments of joy, celebration, moments when standard rations flew out the window, because Rome knew a well-fed soldier is a happy soldier, and a happy soldier fights better. On major festivals like the Saturnalia in December, soldiers receive special rations, quality wine instead of usual pasca, fresh meat from sacrificial animals, better bread. These meals weren't just food, they were a message from commanders: we see you. We appreciate you, you're part of something greater. A major victory or successful campaign completion was also celebrated in a big way. A commander could throw a grand feast for his legions, not only to celebrate success, but as a gesture of gratitude to soldiers for their bravery and fortitude. Food was also part of the reward system. Distinguished soldiers or entire units could be rewarded with extra portions of wine, cheese, or meat. Simple but very clear and effective. But let's talk about the dark side. Because sometimes things went horribly wrong. Supply lines broke, convoys were attacked, sieges lasted too long, and then began the real test. When provisions ran low, the order came. Half rations for everyone. 850 grams became 400. Lardum disappeared, casus was rationed, men started to get really hungry. When half rations ran out, the order changed. Find everything edible. The legion transformed into foragers. They dug up roots, gathered wild berries, mushrooms, acorns, herbs, everything. They fished tiny fish, caught frogs, crayfish. When even that wasn't enough, they sacrificed animals. First mules, then oxen, then, sign of absolute despair, cavalry horses. Seeing cavalrymen slaughter their own mounts was heartbreaking. The most famous story? The Siege of Alesia. 52 BC, Julius Caesar encircles the Gauls of Vercingetorix, but reinforcements arrive, encircling the Romans in turn. Suddenly, legionaries are trapped between two armies, without resupply. Caesar describes how his men survived. They went out at night in the narrow space between fortifications, crawling in darkness, risking death from both camps. For what? To gather a few forgotten ears of grain in fields? A few ears of grain, that's what kept them alive. Some soldiers drank animal blood diluted in water, others chewed leather, but they held on. 60 days, until they broke the encirclement and won. When everything failed, some armies crossed the final line: cannibalism. Plutarch describes Mark Antony's Parthian campaign in 36 BC, a total catastrophe. Some soldiers ate their dead comrades, more common but almost as desperate, eating leather. Soldiers boiled their sandals, belts, shield covers, horse harnesses. They boiled it for hours until it became vile jelly. It had no taste, almost impossible to digest. But it filled the stomach. Those who went through these ordeals and survived were never the same. They had seen the abyss. They had learned what humans are capable of when civilization collapses. But all shared one thing: immense gratitude for every piece of bread, every sip of pasca, every gram of lardum they would receive again, because they knew what it was to have nothing. So what have we learned today? We've seen that the greatest army in history didn't march with meat and feasts, but with grain. Simple, cheap, eternal. We discovered their drink wasn't noble wine, but pasca, diluted vinegar keeping them alive. We learned that a small piece of salted lardum, a bit of hard caseus, and a few drops of garum could transform a bland dish into a bearable meal. We saw how 8 men around a cauldron became a family, how the evening meal ritual created bonds holding an army together. We understood Rome used food as reward, as a morale tool, as a message: you're important to us. And we glimpsed the horror of moments when everything ran out. The Roman legionary diet wasn't sophisticated, it wasn't delicious, it wouldn't win Michelin stars, but it was perfect for its purpose. Caloric, mobile, durable, adaptable, unifying. It was nutritional engineering at its best. Every gram served a purpose. Every element was calculated. Rome didn't conquer the world with brilliant tactics alone, nor with superior weapons alone, nor with better soldiers alone. Rome conquered the world with logistics, with the ability to keep 400,000 men fed, hydrated, and functional across 3 continents for centuries. Barbarians could win a battle, but they couldn't win a 10-year campaign because they couldn't feed an army for 10 years. Rome could. Today, when you eat pasta, direct descendants of Roman pulse, when you dip bread in balsamic vinegar, echo of pasca, when you add soy sauce to your meal, modern cousin of garum, you're perpetuating, unknowingly, traditions 2,000 years old. The legionaries are dead. Their swords have rusted, their camps are ruins, but their food system, it still lives in our kitchens. Because efficiency never dies, because good ideas survive empires. Next time you complain about food, remember legionary Marcus Caelius in Teutoburg Forest soaked, frozen, exhausted, chewing his hard bucellatum, knowing he'll probably never see home again. And yet he continues, he marches, he fights, he survives, fueled by grain, posca, and iron will. If you found this journey into Roman military life fascinating, there's so much more to discover. We're uncovering the hidden stories of history, the real lives of real people behind the textbooks, from what Viking warriors actually ate, to how medieval knights survived winter campaigns, to the secret weapons that changed ancient warfare forever. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Because history isn't just dates and battles, it's about